Picture Rome, the greatest empire the world had ever known, now engulfed in flames. The year is 69 after Christ, and the mighty Roman Empire stands on the brink of collapse. Civil wars tear through its provinces, the economy lies in ruins, and panic spreads through the streets like wildfire. But from these ashes, one man would rise to restore order and transform Rome into a superpower once again. This is the story of Vespasian, the general who became emperor against all odds. Born into a humble family, far from the marble palaces and golden halls of Rome's elite, Vespasian climbed through the ranks of the Roman military through sheer determination and tactical brilliance. When he seized power in the year of the 4 emperors, Rome was drowning in chaos. 4 men had claimed the imperial throne in a single year, plunging the empire into a bloody civil war. Yet where others saw crisis, Vespasian saw opportunity. He would go on to rebuild Rome's economy, restore faith in the empire, and establish one of the most enduring dynasties in Roman history. His legacy would reshape the Roman world for generations to come. Did you know that before becoming emperor, Vespasian was actually mocked by many aristocrats for his common background? They said he looked more like a farmer than a ruler. But this same humble origin would prove to be his greatest strength, giving him the practical wisdom needed to save an empire. If you're fascinated by the rise and fall of empires, the triumph of underdogs, and the remarkable leaders who changed history, you're in for a treat. Join us as we uncover the extraordinary story of the man who rescued Rome from the ashes. Hit that like button, subscribe to Legacy of Empires, and activate notifications so you won't miss any of our upcoming episodes about the ancient world's greatest mysteries and most fascinating characters. Let's dive into the remarkable tale of Vespasian, the unlikely savior of Rome. Unlike many Roman emperors who were born with silver spoons in their mouths, Vespasian's story begins in a small village called Flavian, where he was born into a family of tax collectors. His grandfather had been a simple centurion, and his father worked as a customs official. Far from the marble halls of Rome's elite, young Vespasian grew up learning the value of hard work and practical thinking. Now here's something fascinating. His mother, Vespasian, actually had to push him repeatedly to pursue a political career. At first, Vespasian showed little interest in climbing the social ladder. Can you imagine? The future savior of Rome had to be convinced to enter politics by his mother. But once he joined the army as a military tribune, something extraordinary happened. Vespasian's natural talent for leadership began to shine through. He didn't have the refined manners of the aristocracy, and some even mocked his rustic accent and appearance, but he had something far more valuable: the ability to connect with common soldiers and make smart, practical decisions. Speaking of practical decisions, let me share a brilliant example of Vespasian's pragmatic thinking. When he became emperor, he found Rome's treasury completely empty. So what did he do? He became the first emperor to place a tax on public toilets. Yes, you heard that right. The public restrooms of Rome. When his son Titus complained about this rather unusual tax, Vespasian held up a gold coin and famously said, "Money doesn't stink, my son." This tax, though considered quite peculiar at the time, proved incredibly successful in helping to rebuild Rome's finances. In fact, in some parts of Europe today, the word for public toilets still carries Vespasian's name as a reminder of this ingenious, if unusual, financial measure. What makes this even more remarkable is how it reflects Vespasian's humble origins. Unlike his predecessors who might have considered such matters beneath their dignity, Vespasian wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty, quite literally, if it meant saving Rome. His practical, no-nonsense approach to problem-solving came directly from his modest upbringing, proving that sometimes the best leaders aren't born in palaces, but rise from the common people. The misty shores of Britain would become the stage where Vespasian's military genius truly shone. Under Emperor Claudius, In 43 after Christ, Rome launched one of its most ambitious campaigns, the conquest of Britain, a mysterious island that had fascinated and frustrated Romans since the days of Julius Caesar. Here's a fascinating detail. When Vespasian first arrived in Britain, he commanded the Second Legion Augusta, and in just the first 4 days of the campaign, he engaged in 30 battles. Yes, you heard that right. 30 battles in 4 days. This wasn't just about brute force. It was a display of incredible tactical thinking and lightning-fast decision-making. During his time in Britain, Vespasian personally captured 20 towns and the powerful Isle of Wight. But what made him truly exceptional wasn't just his victory count, it was how he won these battles. Unlike many Roman commanders who relied solely on overwhelming force, Vespasian showed remarkable skill in diplomacy and strategic thinking. Let me share a little-known story from his British campaign. During one particularly challenging siege, Vespasian's son Titus found himself surrounded by enemy forces. Instead of sending in reinforcements that might have led to heavy casualties, Vespasian used a clever deception. He had his troops create far more campfires than necessary, making the British tribes believe they were heavily outnumbered. The enemy retreated without a single Roman casualty. The British campaign transformed Vespasian from a relatively unknown commander into a military hero. Soldiers loved him because he fought alongside them in the front lines, sharing their hardships and dangers. There's a story that during one battle, he personally saved a surrounded legionary by charging into a swarm of enemies, an act that earned him undying loyalty from his troops. But perhaps the most important lesson Vespasian learned in Britain wasn't about warfare at all. It was about leadership. He discovered that true authority comes not from titles or noble birth, but from earning the respect of those you lead. This lesson would prove invaluable when he later became emperor. His success in Britain didn't just earn him military glory, it opened doors in Rome's political circles. Suddenly, the man from humble origins was being talked about in the empire's highest circles. The people loved him, the soldiers respected him, and even the skeptical nobility had to acknowledge his achievements. Little did anyone know that these victories in Britain were just the beginning of an even more remarkable journey to come. The year 69 after Christ was one of the most dramatic periods in Roman history, known as the Year of 4 Emperors. Imagine the chaos. Rome, the greatest empire in the world, saw 4 different men claim the throne in just 12 months. It all began with Nero's suicide. After his death, the empire plunged into a devastating civil war. First came Galba, an elderly aristocrat who lasted just 7 months before being murdered in the Roman Forum. Then Otho seized power, ruling for barely 3 months before taking his own life when his rival Vitellius marched on Rome. Vitellius seemed secure on his throne, but fate had other plans. In the east, the seasoned general Vespasian was winning support from his legions. While Vitellius indulged in luxurious feasts in Rome, Vespasian's forces were advancing. The soldiers loved Vespasian. He was one of them, a commander who shared their hardships and understood their needs. Here's a fascinating detail. While this power struggle was unfolding, Vespasian was actually leading a campaign to suppress the Jewish revolt in Judea. When his troops proclaimed him emperor, he left his son Titus in charge of the siege of Jerusalem and turned his attention to claiming his throne. The final confrontation was brutal. Vespasian's supporters stormed Rome in December, and Vitellius met a gruesome end, dragged through the streets and thrown into the Tiber River. From this bloody chaos, Vespasian emerged as the last man standing. His ascension marked the beginning of the Flavian Dynasty and ushered in an era of peace and prosperity that Rome desperately needed. What's truly remarkable is how Vespasian, a man from humble origins, managed to restore stability to an empire torn apart by civil war. He was practical, down to earth, and focused on what really mattered: rebuilding Rome's economy, strengthening its borders, and restoring public trust in the imperial office. Think about it. In just 1 year, Rome went from the brink of collapse to the dawn of a new golden age. The year of 4 emperors proved that sometimes the most effective leaders aren't born to power. They rise to meet the challenges of their time. And speaking of fascinating facts, did you know that Vespasian was the first emperor to implement a tax on public restrooms? This bold move helped rebuild Rome's treasury, though I imagine it wasn't his most popular decision. What do you think about this unusual tax? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Legacy of Empires for more incredible stories from ancient history. When Vespasian became emperor, Rome was not just politically unstable, it was literally falling apart. The great fire under Nero and years of civil war had left the Eternal City in ruins, but Vespasian had a vision: to rebuild Rome into something even more magnificent than before. His most ambitious project was the Flavian Amphitheater, which we know today as the Colosseum. Here's something fascinating. Vespasian chose to build it on the site of Nero's elaborate private lake, part of the infamous Golden House. This was a brilliant political move. He was literally giving back to the people what Nero had taken for himself. The construction began in 72 after Christ, and though Vespasian didn't live to see it completed, this massive structure could hold 50,000 spectators and remains one of Rome's most iconic monuments. But the Colosseum was just the beginning. Vespasian launched a massive public works program that transformed the city. He restored temples, built new roads, and created public spaces where Romans could gather and socialize. He even rebuilt the Temple of Jupiter on the Capitoline Hill, which had been destroyed during the Civil War. What made Vespasian's reconstruction efforts truly remarkable was how he paid for them. He was a financial genius who understood that a strong empire needed a strong economy. He increased tax collection. Yes, including that famous bathroom tax, but he also made sure the money was spent wisely. He raised the pay of public servants to reduce corruption and introduced new coins to stabilize the currency. Here's a little-known detail. Vespasian also promoted social mobility. He appointed talented men from the provinces to important positions, breaking away from the tradition of limiting power to old Roman families. This brought fresh ideas and energy to the administration of the empire. In the countryside, Vespasian redistributed unused land to small farmers, helping to revive agriculture and strengthen the empire's food supply. He understood that Rome's strength came not just from its magnificent buildings, but from the prosperity of its people. One of my favorite stories about Vespasian's practical nature comes from when his son Titus criticized the bathroom tax. Vespasian held up a gold coin from the tax revenue and asked his son if it smelled bad. When Titus said no, Vespasian replied, "And yet it comes from urine." This shows his pragmatic approach. It didn't matter where the money came from, as long as it helped rebuild Rome. Under Vespasian's leadership, Rome didn't just recover, it thrived. His reconstruction wasn't just about buildings and monuments. It was about rebuilding trust in the government and creating a stable foundation that would support the empire for generations to come. The Rome that emerged under his rule was stronger, more beautiful, and more efficiently run than ever before. The Flavian Dynasty marked a remarkable chapter in Roman history, lasting 27 years and spanning 3 emperors, Vespasian and his 2 sons, Titus and Domitian. What makes this dynasty particularly interesting is how different each ruler was, yet how collectively they shaped Rome's golden age. Let me tell you something fascinating about this family. Unlike previous Roman emperors who claimed divine or noble ancestry, the Flavians came from relatively modest origins. Vespasian was actually proud of his humble beginnings and would often joke about attempts to create elaborate family trees linking him to legendary heroes. He preferred to be known as a self-made man who rose through merit rather than birth. Titus, Vespasian's eldest son, was groomed for power from an early age. He served as his father's right-hand man and proved himself a capable military commander. Here's an interesting detail. Titus was actually commanding the siege of Jerusalem when his father was proclaimed emperor. He later completed this campaign, and the spoils from the Jewish temple helped fund the construction of the Colosseum. When Titus became emperor in the year 79 after Christ, he was already incredibly popular with the Roman people. They called him the delight of mankind because of his generous nature. However, his reign was marked by disasters. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius that destroyed Pompeii and Herculaneum, a devastating fire in Rome, and a terrible plague. Despite these challenges, Titus responded with remarkable compassion, using his own funds to help victims and personally visiting affected areas. But here's where the story takes an intriguing turn. Titus ruled for just 2 years before his death, and his younger brother Domitian took the throne. Domitian was quite different from his father and brother. While Vespasian was known for his practical nature and Titus for his generosity, Domitian was more authoritarian. He styled himself as Dominus et Deus, Lord and God, and demanded to be addressed as such. Despite his controversial personality, Domitian was actually an effective administrator. He strengthened Rome's borders, reformed the currency, and built magnificent public works. He was also a patron of the arts and literature, though ironically, many writers of his time criticized him harshly after his death. One of the most fascinating aspects of Domitian's reign was his building program. He restored the Temple of Jupiter on the Capitoline Hill and built a massive palace on the Palatine Hill that showcased the empire's wealth and power. The palace was so luxurious that even his critics had to admit it was impressive. The Flavian Dynasty came to a dramatic end in 96 after Christ when Domitian was assassinated in a palace conspiracy, but their impact on Rome was lasting. They had taken an empire in crisis and transformed it into a well-organized, prosperous state. The Colosseum, which still stands today, is perhaps the most visible symbol of their legacy. But their true achievement was creating a system of government that would serve as a model for future emperors. Each Flavian emperor, in his own way, contributed to this golden age. Vespasian with his practical wisdom, Titus with his humanitarian touch, and Domitian with his administrative efficiency. Together, they proved that even those from humble beginnings could rise to create one of the most successful dynasties in Roman history. When we look back at Roman history, Vespasian stands out as one of those rare leaders who truly changed the course of an empire. His legacy is so much more than just buildings and battles. It's a masterclass in how to rebuild a nation from the ground up. You know what's really remarkable about Vespasian? His last words on his deathbed perfectly captured his character. As he felt death approaching, he joked, "Dear me, I think I'm becoming a god." This wit and self-awareness set him apart from other emperors who took themselves too seriously. Even in his final moments, he could poke fun at the Roman tradition of deifying emperors after death. But let's talk about what really made Vespasian's legacy so enduring. First, he showed that merit mattered more than birth. Coming from a modest background, he proved that effective leadership doesn't require noble blood. This opened doors for talented individuals throughout the empire, creating a more meritocratic system that would influence Roman governance for centuries. Here's something fascinating. Vespasian's practical approach to government became a model for future emperors. He understood that an empire needs more than just military might. It needs financial stability, efficient administration, and public trust. His famous morning routine of rising early to read official papers and handle state business became a standard that later emperors tried to emulate. The Colosseum, which he began but never saw completed, stands as perhaps his most visible legacy. But did you know that its original name, the Flavian Amphitheatre, was part of a broader strategy? By naming it after his family rather than himself, Vespasian was establishing a dynasty while appearing modest, a clever political move that showed his diplomatic skills. His economic reforms were revolutionary for their time. By reorganizing tax collection and ensuring public money was spent wisely, he created a system that would keep Rome prosperous for generations. That famous bathroom tax? It taught future leaders that unconventional solutions could solve serious problems. One of Vespasian's most lasting contributions was his approach to the provinces. He understood that Rome's strength came from unity, not just conquest. He granted citizenship rights more freely and incorporated provincial elites into the Roman administration. This inclusive approach helped hold the empire together for centuries. There's a wonderful story that perfectly illustrates Vespasian's impact. Years after his death, during times of crisis, Romans would say, "We need another Vespasian." He became the benchmark for practical, effective leadership, the emperor who could make tough decisions while keeping the common touch. Even today, Vespasian's legacy echoes in modern leadership principles. His emphasis on fiscal responsibility, merit-based advancement, and practical problem-solving remains relevant. When we look at the Colosseum, we're not just seeing an ancient monument. We're seeing the vision of a man who understood that great achievements require both bold dreams and practical wisdom. Perhaps Vespasian's greatest legacy was showing that in times of crisis, the right leader can not only restore stability, but build something even stronger than before. He proved that true leadership isn't about grand gestures or divine right. It's about rolling up your sleeves, making tough decisions, and never losing touch with the people you serve. As we face our own challenges today, Vespasian's example reminds us that with practical wisdom, determination, and a touch of humor, even the most daunting problems can be overcome. His story isn't just ancient history, it's a timeless lesson in effective leadership and the power of pragmatic vision. As we conclude our journey through Vespasian's remarkable life, we're left with a powerful lesson that resonates even today. Here was a man who rose from humble beginnings to become one of Rome's most effective leaders, precisely when the empire needed him most. Think about it. Rome was burning, literally and figuratively. The treasury was empty, civil war had torn the empire apart, and faith in leadership was at its lowest point. Yet, from these ashes, Vespasian built something extraordinary. He showed us that true leadership isn't about grand speeches or noble birth. It's about having the courage to make difficult decisions and the wisdom to see them through. His story teaches us something profound about crisis management. When faced with seemingly insurmountable challenges, Vespasian didn't seek quick fixes or popular solutions. Instead, he rolled up his sleeves and tackled problems head-on, whether that meant implementing unpopular taxes or rebuilding Rome brick by brick. The Colosseum stands today not just as a monument to Roman engineering, but as a testament to what determined leadership can achieve. Every time we look at images of this magnificent structure, we're seeing Vespasian's vision made real. A vision that transformed a private lake into a public wonder, a symbol of how leadership can turn crisis into opportunity. And perhaps that's Vespasian's most enduring legacy, the reminder that even in our darkest hours, the right leadership can guide us toward a brighter future. His pragmatic approach, his focus on merit over birth, and his understanding that an empire's strength lies in its people's prosperity. These are lessons that remain remarkably relevant. If you found Vespasian's story as fascinating as I have, there's so much more to explore in ancient history. From the rise of great empires to the leaders who shaped our world, every story holds valuable lessons for today. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Vespasian's leadership style. What aspects of his approach do you think would be most valuable in today's world? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed this journey through Roman history. Subscribe to Legacy of Empires and ring that notification bell to join us on more adventures through the ancient world. Whether we're exploring the rise and fall of empires, uncovering the secrets of great leaders, or delving into fascinating historical mysteries, you won't want to miss a single episode. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of one of history's most remarkable leaders. Until our next historical adventure, remember, great leadership, like Rome itself, wasn't built in a day. See you in our next video.